Coming up on the Making Waves VO podcast.
Yeah. I actually did commercials, recurring spots for a strip club.
Nice. You know you've made it, Rob, when you're doing strip club spots.
Making waves.
Making waves.
Making waves.
Making waves. Making waves.
Making waves.
Making waves.
Making waves. Making waves.
This is the Making Waves VO podcast with Kevin Kilpatrick and Bobby Maxwell.
And this is the Making Waves VO podcast. Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I am doing great. It's another fine day to be in the voiceover world. By the way, the Making Waves VO podcast is presented by Full Compass, fullcompass.com.
We know VO.
And Bobby, everybody's journey is different in voiceover, right? There are some similar paths. Some come from stage acting. Some come from a corporate background. I've heard of people that have had landscaping businesses. One of the more common avenues of getting into voiceover, though, is through radio. I mean, that's how you and I got into it, right, Bobby?
It is, and it's even more in the past, 4 to 5 years because of so many companies merging in the radio industry, and the COVID also, where there were a lot of layoffs. So people were going, oh, wait a minute, I can do voiceover. And so it's really, really become a popular angle to head into that from radio.
You hear that, Bobby? That's the smell of corporate radio stinking. And that's why people are getting out of it. That's why you and I got out of it, basically. And it could be the same reason our next guest got out of radio. Let's welcome a radio veteran, a gentleman who has crossed over into the dark side, as it were, into full-time voiceover here in the last couple of years. And we're going to hear about his journey and some stumbling blocks and some things that he's had success with and some things that he's learned from. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Rob Williams. Hey, Rob.
Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening.
Whatever time zone you're in, it doesn't matter.
Hey, Rob.
Hi there, how are you?
Good.
We're doing good. And Rob, I'm going to let Bobby take over the more formal introduction because you and Bobby go way back. Bobby, if you would, give this gentleman a proper intro.
Okay, Rob and I were actually both from Cincinnati, but we met when we worked at a station in Cincinnati. Gosh, I don't even want to say how many years ago that was because it was a long, long time ago. And
I don't even remember 1994.
I don't know about that. But yeah, so were you doing production back then or were you just on the air?
No, I did production there. I did production at almost every radio station in Cincinnati.
And that's where you really kind of started with voiceover because that's part of your job, right?
Yeah, actually, the very first freelance voiceover job that I did was for Mac Tools, and I was working at the first radio station I ever worked at, and that was WCHO in Washington Courthouse, Ohio. And we had a guy show up. He had a video production company that he ran out of his house. And he said, yeah, I've got a script here that I'd really like a nice voice to read for us, and I'd like anybody who wants to audition for it. So I auditioned for it, and I got it, and it was like 2,782 pages long.
Oh, my gosh.
And this was before digital editing. So I had to sit in his living room, and we recorded on videotape, and it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. So...
And you stayed with it? That's the funny thing.
Yeah, I did. I loved it. There was a lot of editing the poor guy had to do, but...
Yeah. And you like I said, you did voiceover throughout your many years in radio, but Kevin kind of teased this at the beginning. You finally said enough is enough with one particular company that you had been with and without, and then with and without for several times, right?
Oh, tell us about that.
Can you name the company?
Depends on how bad you disparage them.
Well, if I said No Heart Radio, would that give you a clue?
I love it. No Heart Radio. I've no clue who that is, he said with sarcasm.
No, I worked for Clear Channel for about 18 years as production director. We had 8 radio stations and a TV station throughout that whole process. And, initially it was with J-Core Broadcasting, which was phenomenal. They treated well. We got huge cash bonuses at the end of every year. I started in August, and that January they said, "Here's your bonus check." I said, "My bonus check?" They said, "Yeah, everybody gets a bonus check." I said, "I haven't even worked here for a year." And they said, "You still get one." It was like $3,600,
Woo.
Nice.
and that was back in 1994.
Wow. That's when radio was at its peak, I think, though. Like right there, late 80s, early 90s, before corporate took over. Because I knew a bunch of guys that were making a ton of cash. They were making like 300 grand doing morning shows, and they had and that was
Wow.
base salary. And then they had appearances for $100 an hour on top of that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Two guys in Dayton doing a morning show there. They were each making $250.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it just doesn't happen that way anymore. Unless you're like big syndicated or, something like that. Or, working for a No Heart channel and maybe you got a bunch of stations.
And you're doing like 6 jobs, but the same one salary that you started with.
Yeah, it was like being a frog in a pot of cold water on the stove, and they're gradually turning up the stove. Oh, hey, we need you to do this. Oh, yeah, and you're going to need to do this too, and this, and this.
No.
Oh, yes. And you're also the public affairs director.
And the janitor.
Hey there, it's J. Michael Collins, and you're listening to the Making Waves VO podcast with Kevin Kilpatrick and Bobby Maxwell. Now, back to my lobster.
Well, let's talk about voiceover, though, Robin, and your side of that story, because I know if you're a production director for all these years, I did the same thing, and so you're making commercials one after the other, but you're probably more ripping and reading, right, throughout your radio career, or did you treat it a little bit differently?
I treated it differently because I cared about the client. I wanted their commercials to be successful. I didn't want to just slap it together and go, which, in a way you had to because of the time constraints involved. But I would give it some love. And if I said something and didn't like the way I said it, I'd go back and do it and just slice it up and put it together. I wanted to make sure the music matched what I was saying and my tempo and everything. And you could hear commercials. Listen to the radio today. You can hear music behind commercials. It's like, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
I tried to give it as much care as I could possibly give it.
And you were doing a lot of characters then as well, not just announcer voice, right?
Yeah. I actually did commercials, recurring spots for a strip club.
Nice. You've made it, Rob, when you're doing strip club spots.
They wanted me to be their spokesperson, and I'm like, yeah, no. We want Diamond and Mercedes to come in and record with you. And I'm like,
Are you kidding me?
no. And I would dead serious. I said, I'll do him as Bill Clinton. They said, okay. I did him as Bill Clinton. We came on and talked about Mercedes and Diamond and hey.
And don't forget about Cinnamon. She's good, too.
Yeah, Hillary liked him too.
We got Cinnamon on the topless side now, y'all. Give it up for her.
Oh my God, we have dueling Clintons here on the podcast.
I can't play Cinnamon.
Oh, my gosh. So,
Lord.
yeah. After the strip club work, though.
Something you never thought you'd say on the podcast.
Yeah. After the strip club work, ... So, Rob, you did all this. You read all the spots. You did your first freelance gig for Mac Tools. When did you, though, have enough of corporate radio and say, hey, I think I could give this full-time voiceover thing a go?
It'll be 3 years ago this Thanksgiving.
Yay.
I had some issues, if you will, with my supervisor. And we had been working out of our home since 2020 because of the pandemic. So, and at the time, I had been let go as a production director at another radio station, and radio stations were doing away with all their production directors. And iHeart Cincinnati right now has none.
Oh,
Wow.
man.
And so I was laid off, and I was needing a job and needing benefits, and a traffic announcer position came open with 700 WLW, 50,000 watt AM here in town, and it had benefits and was full time. So I took it just so I had the benefits, and I could still do a lot of freelance stuff. But things got out of hand, and I just could not take it anymore. And they said, hey, guess what? It's time to come back to work part-time, 3 days a week. And I said, yeah, I'm going to stay at home. And they said, well, you kind of have to. And I said, oh, I'm not going to. And they said, and I said, you know what? I said, if you let me stay work from home till the end of the year, I will give you that much time to find my replacement. And they said, yeah, we can't do that. I said, okay, here's my 2-week notice.
Wow. Good for you sticking to your guns, man.
And that's when it started. And I at the time, I was, well, I still do. I do like professional Santa jobs. And I posted it on Facebook that I was available. And I had 2 kind of like talent scouts reach out to me. And I was so busy doing Santa jobs that year, I didn't
remember
my
that.
paycheck. I was doing Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at Dayton area hospitals, doing double shifts from 2 to 4 and 9 to 11. And I was, driving about an hour each way. So I would stay up there and ask if they had an extra conference room or an open office that I could sit in. And I was also doing a bunch of podcasts for realtors, and I was doing a bunch of e-learning stuff. So I would record the e-learning stuff in the morning before I went to Dayton. And then when I got up there, I used the time in between to work on the podcasts and the e-learning stuff. And then I would go back to the party. There were parties for employees' appreciation parties.
Even Santa has a side hustle. I love it.
Yeah.
And then the weekends I was doing city tree lightings and all of the Cincinnati area golf club, the country club Christmas party. So I was slammed.
You are a great Santa. Definitely. Don't go anywhere. The Making Waves VO podcast returns in a moment.
You're listening to the Making Waves VO podcast with Kevin Kilpatrick and Bobby Maxwell. Me? Oh, I'm Joe Cipriano, and I'm here for the popcorn.
Bobby. So, I have been, we've been talking about a lot on podcasts lately about the quality of our audio and what can be a death knell for a voice actor if they have audio quality that is not up to snuff, up to par, as good as everybody else. Oh my gosh, what do we do, Bobby, if we're not sure about our audio quality?
Well, you go to the experts, of course. And I'm talking about the folks at fullcompass.com. Not only do they know the equipment, but they know the business, and they've been doing this for decades and decades. So when you go on social media and say, okay, who has this microphone, or what do you think? Why not just call fullcompass.com and say, tell me about this microphone, or how can I improve my sound if it's doing this? I'm telling you, they know their stuff.
They do know their stuff. Like, let's say you're in your booth and you're getting some echoes or a little bit too much reflection. Talk to the folks at Full Compass, because they can say, hey, let's do a little test. Let's hear how things are sounding. And they may go, oh, you need some new bass traps, or oh, you need some foam, or hey, maybe you'd be interested in this new microphone. P.S., Bobby,
Yeah?
at Full Compass right now, they are having a fall clearance sale.
There you go.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Up to 88% off. Up to 88% off right now at Full Compass. And now I'm not talking about just, rando stuff. I'm talking about they've got Neumann microphones on sale. They've got Focusrite interfaces on sale. They've got Shure interfaces on sale. Everything a voice actor needs, chances are you're going to find it on sale right now at Full Compass.
Fullcompass.com. They also do packages that they put together where you can get even more savings. So go check them out. Fullcompass.com.
Click on the banner that says Fall Clearance Sale, and then you can sort the pages. You can display it however you want to, but make sure you check it out. Make sure your sound is up to snuff, up to par, up to being as good as everybody else. Like Bobby said, go to Full Compass, fullcompass.com.
We know VO.
Making Waves returns.
So how did it work when you first made that leap into full-time voiceover? Did you immediately go to pay to play? Did you start marketing? How long did it take you to figure it out that, one works and one doesn't?
Well, I had been scared to death. Obviously that was a big leap. I just did it. and, did it as a leap of faith. I had already been in on several pay-to-play sites and was hit or miss on most of them. Some of them I wasn't getting any traction. I had already some established work. That's the cool thing about being a production director at a radio station. You make a lot of contacts and people ask on the side. So I had a lot of that stuff coming in. But, I had to learn stuff all over. I had to learn about marketing. I had to learn about being aware of my time and what I did with it. And when I don't have things to record, I should be doing auditioning and I should be doing marketing and things like that. And I'm still in the process of learning those things. And it's all, to me, it's like putting together a puzzle. You find each piece as you go along and you get to see what you're creating, and it is just fantastic. I never want to stop learning. I just want to immerse myself and go as far as I can.
I think that's a great mindset, Rob, because I'm the same way. It's like you never stop learning. You never get to a point in your career, in my opinion, doing this, that, oh, I'm good now. I can stop training. I'm good now. I don't need to work with coaches anymore. I don't need to learn new sounds or stay on top of trends. To me, that never happens. You never have it down. What I wanted to ask, though, was as you transition, and it sounds like as production director, you did care about the client and you wanted the spots to be effective. I like that term, that word effective is what I like to use when doing spots and stuff like that. But it sounds like you were already in the mindset of the writing, the client's needs, and having that effectiveness. But are you noticing that things in the full-time voiceover world and the big level stuff they're a lot different than they are in Cincinnati radio?
Oh, majorly. I was in radio for 40 years, and when you do all these rip and read commercials, whether you're trying to make them sound their best or if you don't have time and just have to rip through them, you get the radio mentality stuck in your head.
Yeah.
And when you're doing freelance voiceover work, that's not what they want today. That's the farthest thing from what they want. And I'm working on that today. That is one of my biggest issues that I'm having when I audition. And I knew I had to get coaching. I knew I had to work on it, and I still work on it every day. Like when you sent your primer for your podcast today, I sat there and read it out loud just because it was practice.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you were smart enough that you didn't also put all your eggs in one basket, because, you're doing commercial and character work and e-learning and sportscasting stuff. And that's just smart, because you never know when one genre is going to kind of, fizzle out a little bit.
Well, and a lot of that work is hit or miss too. You never know what you're going to be a fit for, what people are looking for, what agents are looking for, what talent scouts are looking for. And you've got to be prepared. That's kind of the way it was in radio. I learned as much as I possibly could. They're the people that say, that's not in my job description. Well, guess what? You're only hurting yourself. The more you know, the more equipped you are. And I even do for years, and this just happened in my lap because of one of my production director jobs. A salesperson scheduled a recording session with me. I'm thinking it's for a client. And he walks in with these 3 guys and says, okay, I'm going to leave you guys to it. And he left. And the station's policy was, if you bring clients in for a session, you sit there and stay right with them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck is this? So the guy tells me, we have a radio station that does an overnight trucking show, and they want us to create a newscast that we can put in there for 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes. We don't know how to go about it, and we need some help. And they paid me to come up with an idea and a platform and a format for this 3.5-minute newscast. It began with another gentleman writing it and voicing it, and I just produced it. And it was once a week, and I sent it to them, and they played it on the radio. Well, then came along Sirius XM satellite radio, and that show went to mornings on the Sirius XM Road Dog channel 146,
Love
the
it.
Dave Nemo show. And I did... I continued to produce it. The guy who voiced it became seriously ill, at the last minute, they said, hey, we want you to do the newscast. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, we want you to voice it, to write it, produce it. And I'm like, I don't know anything about trucking.
Or
And they
news.
said, well, you've been doing this for all these years. And I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't listening.
Just get my job done.
So, they said, okay, we'll hire a writer for you. So they said, we'll go live with this once a week, the first of the year. So 3 days before the end of the year, I get a call. Hey, guess what? We hired a writer, but we had to fire her. Okay, so? Well, you're going to have to write it too. I'm like, what have you gotten me into? No, we'll help you. So I didn't get any help.
Sure.
Google was my friend. I Googled a bunch of audio or a podcast. I Googled websites for trucking, everything I possibly could think of. And I learned that way. I basically taught myself, and I thought, you know what? The old version of this was kind of stodgy, and it wasn't really anything hard hitting. It was talking about what trucking companies had a picnic to, and what awards they gave to certain drivers and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm gonna start talking about trucking. So I did that, and they loved it. And they said, we want to do this 5 days a week.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, how much will that be? And it's like, well, what we're paying you for one times 5. And I'm like, holy mackerel. So I did that, and that continued up until the pandemic. So I had done this since 2000, and we lost our sponsor. Our sponsor was TA Petro Travel Centers of America. And they let me go continue for a year, paying me out of their own pocket. And then they said, we got to realize reality here.
They could have got another sponsor for that.
They tried,
Yeah.
really did. And
Man.
it was not cheap. It was a lot of money. And so they said, we're going to have to quit doing this. I'm like, okay, well, I appreciate everything you've done for me. And then after a couple years of staying in touch and just pestering them about when are we bringing the newscast back, they finally said, hey, would you be willing to fill in for Dave Nemo on the air? And I'm like, you mean talk to truckers? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never done anything like this. And they said, okay, well, we'll have somebody co-host it with you. And I'm like, oh, okay, that'll be better. So, I did that, and it was a one-time shot. We had connection problems. We had audio problems. It was a nightmare. And the other guy basically carried the weight of the whole thing. And then they came up with different options of connections and said, will you do this one more time? Will you do this one more time? And then within the last year or so, they asked me to start filling in for the Tim Ridley show, which is 2 hours before the morning show. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And Tim was sick. He was out 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, and then another week. And now I've become their full-time fill-in guy on SiriusXM Radio. So I got that going on the side too.
Nice.
This is John Malone coming to you straight from the Malone Zone. And you've got the best VO podcast in the whole internet right here. The Making Waves VO Podcast with Kevin and Bobby. Boy, are you lucky.
So we just did an episode, on, ancillary income, areas around voiceover where you can make money. And you're doing it in a couple of different ways by being Santa Claus, which is an acting gig, and then doing the radio show. That's super cool. What, Rob, genres, though, have you found your footing in since you've been doing this, right at 3 years?
I do a lot of commercial work. I do a lot of e-learning, and I do a lot of character stuff.
Where are you doing your character stuff? For
Yeah,
individual clients or animation or what?
I am doing a lot of games for your cell phone. I'm doing a lot. There's this new toy called a Tony box, and it's about a maybe 5 or 6 inch by 6 inch box with physical knobs on it, and it's got a head that looks kind of like a dog with ears, and it's designed to basically play stories for kids. They're interactive. They ask you questions, and there's buttons you can push on the box, and it's really a neat concept. And I've done several of those, and I just auditioned for about 10 characters on another one yesterday.
And is that through pay to play, your agent, or?
The first ones that I did were on pay to play, and this one came up through my agent, and I said, hey, I've done work for these guys before, and they're awesome to work with. And they're like, oh, awesome. So I was surprised that they ended up coming through my agent, which maybe tells me that they're not getting what they want or what they're looking for through the pay to plays, and they're going now to casting agents and directors.
Kevin and I have talked about many, many times how these regular clients where you're getting a bulk work are just so important to our careers and our sustainability. And like you just said, when you can get job after job after job doing a character or a commercial or whatever, is just, it can make and break you.
Yeah. But again, the most important thing to remember is do not put all your eggs in one basket and rely on a couple clients, because they're not going to be around forever.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope. That's cool to hear that side of your story. What are some of the stumbling blocks that you've encountered over the last 3 years? Or I guess we could go way back, but I'm just talking about in terms of freelance voiceover work while you're in radio or in the last 3 years. What kind of stumbling blocks have you encountered that you have learned from that, somebody else might learn from? You telling that story.
Well, I mentioned it before, getting rid of the radio voice, one. Number two is you've got to be prepared for the downtimes. There are going to be downtimes. And a lot of times I would be super busy January, February, March, and April, and everybody would be talking about how slow things were. And then my slow period would come 3, 4, 5 months later. So for everybody, I think it's different. It has to do with your connections. It has to do with the businesses and clients you're doing work for. It has to do with the region you're in. It has to do with staying active and staying in touch with the contacts that you have, just being a little buzz in their ear. But, that is huge. When you have a downtime, it can affect you mentally. You can start to think, what am I doing wrong? Mm-hmm. Has my sound changed? Am I not working hard enough? Did I make somebody angry and now I'm blackballed?
That never happens.
Did I tell somebody's kid as Santa that they was getting something for Christmas and they didn't get it?
Well, I'm interested with a production background, how it goes with your demos. I think we've talked about this, just you and I in person. The demo producers will say, you got to get a professional demo. But I mean, obviously, your way around audio and producing things. So are you doing your own demos? Are you using real jobs? How's that working for you with your background? I
have done all my own demos, and this will probably not make a lot of demo producers happy. Nothing against them. They do wonderful work. And especially a lot of people who don't have a background in doing this, you need to get a professionally produced demo.
Right.
But, having done production in radio for 40 years, I know what sound, music sounds good, sound effects. I have access to all that stuff. I have been very fortunate in that arena. And I know my demos need work. I know I need to get rid of the radio reads, but I've also got some actual spots in there that I've actually done. As a matter of fact, probably 99% of the stuff that are on my demos is actual work that I did.
Yeah.
Were you getting those clips from the clients, or is that self-produced stuff, self-produced work?
Both. Sometimes I'll do, and what you got to be careful about in using stuff that you've done in your demos, you need to get permission to do that.
Yeah.
You just slap it in there and say, man, that sounds great. Because, sure enough, you're going to have somebody who says, hey, we didn't give you permission to put that in your demo.
Yeah. Could be an internal corporate piece or something like that, that they didn't want out there.
Or it could be something they never used and it was confidential information. You never know.
Yeah. What about thoughts of, advice that you would give to people moving forward? And, we talked about the stumbling blocks a little bit, but what are some positives that maybe surprised you that you can share with us since you've been doing this?
Yeah, I tend to be responsible for me. I want to be my own self-motivator. And I try to listen to podcasts. I listen to podcasts all the time. I listen when I'm mowing the lawn. I listen when I'm driving somewhere. I listen while I'm in the shower, because to me, that's learning. And there's a lot of great information out there in podcasts that will help you with your career in voiceover.
Do you listen to the Making Waves VO podcast? I said, do you listen to the Making Waves VO podcast? Sorry.
Of course. That is one of my favorite.
I'm just messing
Better
with you.
be.
I love you guys. You guys do a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm honored to be on here.
We do this feature, Rob, Nightmare Sessions on the podcast. And I know we didn't tell you to think about anything, but I want you to tell Kevin about the nightmare you had. Was it last year or the year before when your basement flooded where your studio is?
Yeah, a nightmare session, Rob, is just an account where, oh my gosh, this could not have gone worse. You know, all the stars are lined up against me, and there's some bad juju in the air.
Nightmare Sessions.
Oh, they're at juju, all right. You know what? Having been in radio and I'm kind of an equipment geek, so I knew how to hook up my own stuff for my own studio. When I had this house built back in 1999, I had a room set aside for my studio in the basement. And then 17 years later, I got a divorce and I moved out of the house for 3 months, and my wife turned that room over to the kids to destroy. So we compromised. We got back together, and I was left to a bedroom upstairs. So that's where I restored my studio. And then the kids moved out and we got divorced. And we didn't get divorced twice. We got the final divorce then after that. And after doing all of my stuff, my radio, my traffic reports and everything upstairs in the studio, I thought, you know what? I got that room down in the basement. I need to move everything down there. And my wife worked at home as well. She's a customer service rep for a jewelry company, and she worked in the room next to me. So I couldn't do any live directed or basically any recording sessions during the day because you could hear her in the next room talking on the phone. So I decided to move down to the basement. And the room had been painted so many times, and there was such a thick layer of what do you call it? Latex paint on the ceiling. One of the pipes burst in the finished ceiling in that studio in the basement, in that room. And I walked into the room and I could hear this pat, pat, pat. It was a drip. And I looked up at the ceiling and there was this enormous bubble about the size of a hippity hop full of water dangling from the ceiling from all that latex paint. You know, so I popped it and this water went everywhere, and I had just had hardwood floors put in, and all my foam was hung on the walls. I had to take it all down. I had to take, luckily the floor wasn't damaged, but I had to call somebody in here to tear apart the ceiling and find the leak and fix the leak. And then I had to find somebody to come in and redo the ceiling, the drywall, and paint the room and everything. And that was a nightmare. That took forever. But luckily, none of my equipment was in the room. So, and I still had my upstairs as a backup, and I could record in the evenings, and I would even be in there overnight a lot of times doing stuff. Yeah. So, but luckily, it didn't affect me too bad. I was very fortunate, and especially because I didn't have any equipment damaged. But I've had other sessions where, one was the very first recording I did for Intel. I do a lot of e-learning for them. This was the very first one. It was at a studio in downtown Cincinnati, and I showed up and didn't have a script beforehand. And they handed me the script, and it was like 6 or 7 pages long of small print. And I was not expecting anything like this. So I started getting nervous. There was 3 people in the other room, plus the producer. And I just let it get to me. And I kept screwing up and screwing up and screwing up. And I finally thought, this is done. I'll never do this again. And I was being live directed over a phone patch. And it just was a nightmare. And, they called me a week later. Hey, we got another one for you.
Wow.
You do? Are you crazy?
So we're always second guessing our work. Obviously, you sounded just fine.
I guess. I mean, there's no way in the world I thought I sounded fine. And they must have thought otherwise. But, man, I was grateful for that, and I've done a ton of work for them since.
Yeah, the callback says it all, man. So, yeah, we're a lot of times tough on ourselves, and that's probably what you were doing. Just being too tough on yourself.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was bad. It was bad.
Well, I love that mindset, though, that like what was bad to you was totally good for them and so good that they wanted you again. So that's a happy ending to that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always my worst critic. And I think, it can be bad if you let it get to you and let you get you down and you start believing it. But on the other end of the spectrum, it helps you push yourself to get better.
In the Making Waves VO podcast, we'll be right back.
This is Katie Lee, and you've got the best VO podcast in all of the land right here. The Making Waves VO podcast with Kevin and Bobby. Enjoy.
As a voice actor, you want to focus on what's important, right? Like pulling off the perfect read. You don't want to stress about tech stuff. That's why Full Compass is in your corner. With 50 years experience in pro audio, Full Compass has everything we voice actors need. Mics, headphones, monitors, mixers, interfaces, DAWs, all the goodies. And their certified product experts help with everything they sell. Plus, you can get free same-day shipping, flexible financing, and a low price guarantee. See it all at fullcompass.com. Fullcompass.com. They know VO.
And now back to Making Waves. Is there any genre that you've yet to tackle that's on your radar?
I have not done audiobooks, and I'm
you may not want to.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of work.
I respect those people so much.
I do too. We both know somebody a couple people, Bobby, that are very good at it and do a lot of work at it. Mm-hmm. But I think it takes a special person, and you got to be really organized and really good time manager, and on top of that, you have to be good at your craft and be able to do stories. I did one audiobook. I started to do it, and it was written by a local guy. He owned another business, and I did his commercials for him, and he wanted me to do his book. And he's like, man, if you do this, he said, I've got 6 more versions of this coming. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Well, I started reading the first couple chapters. Number one, it had about 24 characters in it. Woo. And he wanted different voices for each one. And the content was just absolutely mind-blowing. It went into, I don't know if you want to keep this in here or not, but it went in very detailed into a rape scene.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And it's like, I'm not doing this. I can't do this. So I told him, I said, oh, you know what, I am terribly sorry, but I can't fit this into my schedule. I got in over my head. I didn't know what I was, expecting, and he understood, and I'm sure I lost a lot of money, but I just can't do that.
Yeah, somebody will pick it up though. Somebody will pick that up.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
And it might not have just been that. It could have been eventually a time situation. That's why I don't get into them, because I think I would take too much time doing that and miss out on my regular job. So I don't even go there.
Yeah. Yep. Wow. Know your strengths and know your weaknesses.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Rob, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today, man. We have learned a lot, and we have learned some great stories from you and your career path and everything. If somebody was listening right now and wanted to reach out to you just to chat with you or possibly to book you, what's the best way to reach you?
You can reach me via my email, rob@robwilliamsvo.com. Or not to be confused with robwilliamsbo.com. Or you can text me or call me 513-923-0605.
Hey, and if you're in the tri-state area, call him about being a Santa Claus.
There you go. Yeah. I would love to ruin your party.
Ho, ho, yes.
I got to apologize for my dog if you've heard a very slight snoring going on in the background.
No, not at all.
Oh, I thought that was Bobby.
I was boring.
We're pet friendly around here.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, much continued success moving forward, and thanks so much again for joining us on the Making Waves VO podcast.
It has been my pleasure. Thanks so much, Bobby and
Kevin.
I was wanted to say Bobby and Steve because Steve is your husband. Boy, it was a nice thought to want to have me on this show, and the fact that you're not going to now does not.
Oh man,
Kevin is my work husband, so that's all right.
Where do you find good help these days?
Thanks, Rob. We appreciate you being here.
Well, that was fun getting to know Rob, and it's neat getting to know somebody that is more recently into full-time voiceover. I know he's got a background, but it's neat to hear the journey and the tales that, the nightmare sessions and all those things.
He didn't bring this up, but he was kind of freaking out when he went full-time voiceover because it's overwhelming. It's like, I have to make as much money as I was making, and if I don't have the leads or I don't have the connections yet, you're just going, well, what am I going to do? So, and he is doing so well. He's so successful, and I'm so happy for him that he's to the place that he is.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about that, Bobby. When you take that leap into full-time voiceover, it's like you are jumping off of a cliff.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go, is my parachute going to open?
Right.
That's really it right there. And when you are doing this, and you have made it your full-time career choice, and there are slow times, your job is to find the work. Like, you've always got something to be doing. Always.
Yeah, we've both been approached. Everybody in voiceover has been approached and like, do you have any leads on jobs? Or if you ever need a voice, and it's like, you have to hustle and get that work. And that's why what Rob is doing is so smart by listening to podcasts and going to the webinars and all that, because you're picking up so many tips by doing that.
Absolutely. Good stuff, Bobby. The Making Waves VO podcast presented by Full Compass, fullcompass.com.
We know VO.
We'll talk to you next time, Bobby. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
The Making Waves VO podcast is produced by K2 Media Productions with hosts Kevin Kilpatrick and Bobby Maxwell. Sound design and editing by Jason Traver. Production assistance by Lacey Deline. Publicity and social media by Shannon Scott and Silas Phillips. Be sure to subscribe to the Making Waves VO podcast on your favorite platform. For all episodes, merchandise, gear, and more, visit makingwavesvo.com. Until next time, I'm AJ McKay. Keep making waves.